This Maker video is about the object editor. We've introduced you to the object editor in the other Maker videos, but this video is going to give you a much more in-depth look at what it's all about. First of all, the object editor builds control objects. Now, control objects are just controls, are the buttons, switches, drop-down menus, meters, labels, and LEDs that we've used to construct our part of the My interface, which is on the right-hand side. The menu controls on the bottom come from the standard interface and were also created by the object editor. As a matter of fact, all the controls shown on the interface were constructed with the object editor. So it's a good thing to know as much about this important MakerPlot tool as possible. So let's start to learn about it. As we can see, the object editor consists of four main tabs: Config, Media Color, Controls 1, and Controls 2. Now that's on the left-hand side of the drop-down menu. On the right-hand side, we see a drop-down menu that is the same regardless of which tab is selected. This menu displays all the individual controls that are used on the interface, and here's a brief look at it now. It starts with a group of objects, as they're called, that are not visible as user interactive controls. There are a total of 7 of these controls labeled O Timer, O Back, O Analog, O Digital, O Message, O Reset, and O Double Click. Now, we've used 2 of these in our My interface, and remember how we changed the background color of the object area to gold? Well, that was handled by the O Back, or Object Background. That's right here. This is the back's gold JPEG that defined our gold background for our interface. Once again, that was handled by the O Back, or Object Background. Then, to display the digital data, we use the O Digital object, which link a text box to the incoming digital data, and that is over here. And that was used with an event code that linked the text box txt67 to the incoming data, which was DIN, and we also added a MakerPlot instruction to convert the binary DIN data to digital. So these are the first 7 objects. The other controls are listed in the order they were created, starting with the LBL-COMM object. But before we look at these individually, let's look at how they are named. Notice that each object starts with 3 lowercase letters. And these letters generally identify what the object is, like LBL for label, or DRP for drop, or BUT for button. Then the next set of letters identify what the object does, like COMM for comport, BAUD for baud rate, and RESET for resetting the plot. Now these are generally 4 letters, but can be more if needed. And finally, there's a double dash followed by the type of object, like O label, O drop, O button, and so forth. Now these are the objects that comprise the Controls 1 and Controls 2 list, which we'll get into shortly. In the meantime, I should say that these object names are created automatically by the object editor, so that's something you don't have to worry about. In effect, the object editor creates a reasonably sounding first part of a name and then appends the object type to the end. Now, to give you an example of a typical control, let's click on one of the objects in the list. Let's say the button reset, and examine it further. Okay, we're on that. Let's click on this one. And here we have the full name of the object, BUT, capital RESET, double dash, capital MP underscore IMG BUTN underscore OBJ, and that stands for MakerPlot Image Button Object. Right under that is the name of the object, as we pointed out, the BUT, RESET. These are the coordinates of the object, and these are in the absolute coordinates of our MakerPlot interface. And those coordinates indicate the left top, width, and height of the object. And we can come down to the object in particular, and that's the one down here under the control, and that is our reset plot. So that's the object we're talking about. And we can now look at the properties, functions, and values of this particular object. As we see, its label is reset plot, which is exactly what it shows on the front of the object. Then the rest of the functions have to do specifically with the object itself, and this varies from object to object. But this object is somewhat typical of most of the buttons and switches and controls, so let's take a look at it. Now, this object comprises of two different graphic images. Now, the first one is the off image, which is a green GIF file. So that's image 0. And we can see that over here right to the left of the 3 dots, and that is our green off state. Image 1 is the on state. So whenever we click on this particular object, it's going to go from the dark green to the light green. And so that will indicate to us that indeed we have an object that we have actually clicked on and it's reacting to our click. Some of the other properties are useful, like for example, this is channel, it's equal to 0. We don't really need that in this particular object. The auto format we don't need, the decimals format we don't need. The border we can use perhaps, but we've elected to turn it off so that it's really none. The value, we don't really have a value for this. Font size, yes, font size is 6. And the font size fits perfectly into the size of the reset plot button. Font name, well, it's okay, that's Arial. The font color is all F's, which makes it a white. The alignment is in the center. The type is a momentary switch. We can choose either momentary, on, off, or static. So this particular image button is a momentary one, but again, we can change that. Sound. You just heard the sound. So that is our sound. That's our click wave. So every time we push our reset plot, we're going to hear this sound. Menu, yep, we want to keep that clicked, and then about is just about the particular author that generated this. We have below it the duplicate, visible, and delete buttons. We can duplicate this button if we want just by clicking on it, and we've shown you how to do that in our other examples here with the LEDs, the meters, the y-axis adjusts, and other controls here on the right-hand side, so we won't really duplicate that. We want to keep the visible checkbox checked because that keeps the object visible on our interface. And why would we not want to have it visible? Well, there are cases where we want to be able to allow the control to be visible or invisible depending on the actions of other buttons or switches. Then we have our delete button, which we can use to delete this particular object. Then below that we have our text tip. Now we don't have our text tip filled in, so let's do it just so that we can see how this is done. So this is our reset plot, and so for a text tip, we're going to put in here resets plot to time 0 and push the enter key. When we move our cursor over the reset plot button, there is our text tip, resets plot to time 0. So this is how you can enter text tips to kind of identify what the control does or should do to the user. Then there's an area here for update value. This is something we'll explain shortly, and it's a way to make this control update itself based on various events that may be occurring or data that may be coming in, like analog data or digital data. And then there's the event code. And the event code for this button is executed every time we click the button, and that is we're going to reset the plot. And we're going to reset the plot using a single MakerPlot instruction identified by !RSET. So all of the other controls are generally like this. Let's take a look at another one. Here is another one, which is our reset axis. And this is the one just below the reset plot button. And it has the same general properties and functions. And notice it does have a text tip. It says set access to current user settings. And if we come under here, sure enough, it says set access to current user settings. Now we have text tips for both of our buttons. And it also has a different event code assigned to it, which means it's going to reset the y-axis, and it's going to do that by using the MakerPlot instruction that says !SPAN txtymin, txtymax. So that's going to set the minimum and maximum values for the y-axis, and then it's going to set the minimum and maximum values for the time axis using two instructions, which are tmin and tmax. So that's about it on how the object editor names controls and also how the controls are configured. And once again, consult the documentation menu item on our website to get a much more detailed review of this part of the object editor functions.